The deeper you go, the better the game gets. Just one of the many reasons it's the best Dragon Ball Z game ever. Dragon Ball Z Budokai. Go deeper.
Welcome back to Retro Rebound. In today's video, we are going back to Dragon Ball Z Budokai 1. We had a massive Dragon Ball panel today, and I just kind of felt like celebrating this series. You know, we've gone through so many Dragon Ball games, but a buddy of mine said, hey, you've never really sat down and individually picked apart Budokai 1, 2, 3, Budokai Tenkaichi 1, 2, 3. We've kind of done it on the flyby with so many other games surrounding it, and it's so true because there's so much to Dragon Ball Z Budokai. If I were to say this experience was like anything else as a kid, I would draw the comparison to Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, a game that we've also talked about here on Retro Rebound, where it was that feeling of watching the show come to life in ways you never expected, where some of the video game cutscenes were outdoing what the show was doing at the time, and so it made it more fun to run through the story, and it's why we tolerated it game after game after game after game after game, because there were so many fights in Dragon Ball, many of them great, but some of them looked even better in the video games. And it all started with Budokai, the first big 3D fighting Dragon Ball game, and it was retelling the story going from the Saiyan saga all the way up to the Cell saga. So I just played through the whole game, why not? Saw so many secrets, the world tournament, the skills, the leveling up, all this fun stuff, and I thought, you know what? Let's go ahead and pick it apart, because this is where it all truly began for many of us. So ladies and gentlemen, if you're new here and you're into nostalgic and retrospective content, you're in the right place. Please do consider subscribing, as we talk a lot about Dragon Ball. And now, let's begin with the story. You've seen this story 1,000,001 times before. You know what happens in the Saiyan saga. You know what happens during the Frieza saga. You know what happens in the Cell games. But some cool things to point out here, I will say. Number one, this was during a time where the game, like a certain HD collection beside me, had not censored things. So when you see Trunks get a ki blast to the chest, when you see the special beam cannon go through Raditz and Goku, you see blood. You see parts of the rib cage even. It's gross. It's nasty. And there are all parts of this story that have blood and grit to it. And it reminded me so much of, I don't want to sound like a hater, but what Dragon Ball used to be. Especially seeing the story of Z for the millionth time and realizing, wow, everyone was involved here. It's why I really liked the universe survival arc at the end of Super, because it felt like everyone was participating while most of the show was about just Goku and Vegeta and their adventures for 80 to 90 episodes, which was just a little too overkill. And it's funny because when you play DBZ Kakarot, you realize it should have just been called DBZ Gohan, because it's there you realize this whole story is pretty much about Gohan. But it makes you recognize how serious Dragon Ball used to be. And when the tensions were high, when you saw a death like when Krillin got lifted up by Frieza and you saw the armor start to grow and he blew up to bits, such a powerful moment, one of the most famous moments in all of Dragon Ball, and you thought there, like, you know what, that actually might be it. Maybe my kid brain just didn't know any better at the time, but reliving those moments, it made me realize a few things about Dragon Ball. That there were times there was blood, there was grit, people did potentially die, or people did die, like Raditz is still dead. You know, this crazy stuff was all happening in this story, and it's amazing to see how the tensions gradually went down because, well, every character is so popular now, none of them can die. That's just a non-starter now. But perhaps my favorite thing that I rediscovered here in Budokai 1 were what I call the what-if scenarios. So the way the game's story is handled is kind of interesting. You run through the game once, and it's pretty much every battle involving Goku or Vegeta, sometimes Piccolo, and then when you finish that, it doesn't tell you anything. You go back into the story mode, and you're gonna see little chapters here and that are new. Like you're gonna be able to play as the Z Fighters and Piccolo as they fight to defend Earth until Goku can arrive in time and help save them from Nappa and eventually Vegeta. All that is skipped the first run through, so you run through just parts of the story a second time. So it's already about a 2-hour story tops, and then you run through it again for maybe another hour. And what you unlock after that is probably the best part of the game in this secret fun story chapter, where you pretty much play as the villains. You play as Vegeta during the Saiyan saga. You play as Frieza during, naturally, the Frieza Namek saga. And you play as Cell during the Cell saga. And it kind of tells this story of what happens if they win. Like, Vegeta will become Super Saiyan at the end of the Saiyan saga in this what-if scenario. And hilariously, Cell will absorb Krillin during his saga. And what's so incredible about this is he loses power. They give him this crazy skin. It's amazing, but he loses power. It made me laugh out loud. So the story is there, and it is the Dragon Ball Z story that you know and love, but there are secrets in there that are fun. And there is a bit of remembering how it used to be a little more violent, if you will, how the stakes felt just a little bit higher, but also remembering how the cutscenes were delivered at the time, and they're still impressive to this day, quite frankly. I think all the cinematics still look really good. The game has a fantastic flow. I love the epic nature. As a kid, I always got hyped up when it was my turn to fight, and you'd see the screen pop up where half the character's face was showing. You'd see the whole moveset there. I don't know, as a kid, it was just so dope to me. It was like, damn, he's really taking it seriously. Like, I'm getting goosebumps over this. So I was all about what was happening here in Dragon Ball Z Budokai. But there's more to talk about, such as the complete in-box experience for not one, but 2 copies of Budokai 1. So let's get into that, shall we? And here we have 2 complete in-box copies for Dragon Ball Z Budokai. Of course, we're going to begin with the original on PlayStation 2 with some beautiful cover art here. I love how all the villains are in a red hue, and then you have Goku in his normal colors, makes him really pop compared to the rest. The back of the box says, a showdown of legendary proportions. Enter the Dragon Ball Z Budokai. Test your skills against the most powerful Dragon Ball Z heroes and the most sinister villains. Will you be the last warrior standing? Then it says, battle for supremacy in 5 fierce fighting modes. Relive Dragon Ball Z's most intense rivalries. Thrash your way to the Cell games. Unleash up to 60 combo moves per character, including Special Beam Cannon and Kamehameha. And over here, it says, by the way, animated blood. Important to shout out there. Rare in Dragon Ball games. Follow the Dragon Ball Z animated series from the Saiyan Saga to the Cell games. Face off with up to 23 mighty Dragon Ball Z warriors. Unlock, collect, and trade devastating skills with friends to create the most powerful fighters in the universe and battle at blazing speeds in the Burst Zone. Meanwhile, on the inside here, pretty simple disc art, but it's really the manual that's the star of this show because, yes, as you would have hoped, it does have illustrations. It does have cool little quotes within it. I'll point out one in particular I like, but you'll see that Master Roshi and Hercule are going to be providing advice to us all throughout this entire manual, from the advanced controls to saving and loading, editing your skills, so on and so forth. But here you have some great art of the Ginyu Force. My favorite one comes during the story section here. You'll see that there's a breakdown of each of the 3 sagas. I know I say Frieza saga a ton in this video, so apologies for that. I know it's the Namekian saga, before anyone corrects me. But here you'll see that it covers these 3 sagas, as I mentioned. But this is the only little tidbit you get of some type of secret story being available. It says, Master Roshi says there are at least 2 sides to every story. I really shouldn't need to tell you this, but just because it seems to end doesn't mean it's over. With persistence, you can uncover hidden secrets and elements and become the ultimate warrior. And that's where, 2 sides of the story, you get to play as the villain for each of these sagas in Dragon Ball Z Budokai. But it continues on. Great Cell art here. More tips from Hercule. Great Gohan art. They have my favorite shot of Trunks in this manual, which I think is the next page here. Yes, I love this shot of Trunks. He just looks so cool to me. I know there's that other image of Trunks it's not in this manual, but he's like gigantically jacked. Now, I'm not crazy about that one. You can see some in-game screenshots are also being used, so it's not just colors with illustrations reused from the manga or the show. It's definitely some original stuff as well. And we get here to the back where they're promoting the Android 13 movie on VHS and DVD. Those were the days, and that is the back of the manual. So that's a complete box copy of Budokai 1 on PS2. And then you have here the HD collection, which is, you know, frowned upon a bit because a lot of people don't like that the original soundtracks for these games are missing due to some plagiarism issues with the game. But here it says, back-to-back Budokai Brawl, two of the most popular Dragon Ball Z games in one special collection, now enhanced and remastered in high definition for the first time on the PlayStation 3 system. Kind of surprising not to have a Budokai Tenkaichi collection when you think about it, but anyway, here we have Budokai stands above any of the previous attempts to turn the series into a fighter, so a little bit of shade here, kind of making its way into the back of the box. And most companies nowadays, given people's standards, would die before putting this here. 8 out of 10, so not too bad. Now, what's really cool about this copy, I think, is if we pop this open here and we remove the manual and stuff, this is a double-sided cover, but what I really like about the double-sided cover is it leans into the greatest hits art for the game. Specifically, the Budokai 3 greatest hits art is really cool. Otherwise, it's just a rising fist coming in from Goku. So I always liked this. I'm normally not huge on the double-sided art, but this game did win me over a bit. You can see there's still Vegeta and Piccolo here on this side, and it's the same over here. But nonetheless, thought that was really cool. Wanted to point that out. The manual for the game is particularly thick, but that's because it's supported in 2 languages. Otherwise, it's black and white, and then here we're already on to the other language. So you can see just how thin it is. There's nothing as special in here. It's, you know, the same exact game. Nothing new was added to it. They just resold the Budokai 1 and 3 in a collection. I wish they could have put 2 in this because 2 is my favorite of the entire trilogy. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is a complete box copy of the HD collection as well as Budokai 1 on PS2. Remember how I said the cutscenes really brought the show to life? I think one of the best moments of that is the burst zone. So this is something that is almost like a defensive technique that you can activate, and you have to rotate the analog sticks real quickly, and the screen turns black, and everyone's just throwing punches as quickly as possible. As a kid, I'm so stupid, man. I feel like we all have this thought about us as a kid. Like, what was I thinking was accomplishing that? But I'd like jump up on my feet and start like throwing haymakers at the screen and stuff. I didn't make contact, but I was throwing haymakers at the screen, getting all jumped up because I'm like, yo, I'm fighting against Android 16 right now. I don't know why I took my hands off the controller thinking like my physical being was helping out Goku or something like that. But the burst zone was awesome. I lose those burst zones all the time as a kid and go, oh man, maybe next time. I guess that's one way to get your exercise while you're playing some games. But this to me was like one of those moments where they captured there are shots in Dragon Ball Z where you see them throwing punches, but they're throwing it like at the screen almost. So you don't see them both fighting it out. I don't know what the technique for that would be called, but it's effectively hiding them animating 2 characters at once in just one and selling the fight that way. Where here you're actually able to see them really going at it. So there's moments like that which brought the anime to life. But it's also this wacky arcadey fighting game where the combos are really simple, like punch, 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 energy button, and there goes your Kamehameha. You'll hear the same voice line spat out, Kamehameha, Kamehameha. And you'll see the same movesets being shared among all these characters, whether it's Ki Blast Wave from, I think, Teen Gohan or Goku, to Parmesan Shower, which is an amazing name for a Ki Blast rain that you're going to do. There's not a ton of move variety at first, but it gets there over time. Still, the inputs are really simple in Budokai 1, even though there's 23 fighters in the game. You gotta remember, these were the starting grounds that would eventually lead us to that incredible Budokai Tenkaichi where things really blew up in the terms of roster size. So let them cook, start small, right? Now, the reason I say it's still an arcadey fighter is because as you run through the story multiple times, this was at the point in the fighting game genre where not every fighter was there out the box. I still miss that so much. I really do. I love MK1 as just a random example of a fighting game I picked up recently. But there is that kind of weird feeling of firing it up, and like right now, I think the only character I would have been missing would be Shang Tsung, because if you don't pre-order the game, then you don't get the code that comes inside the box. But I love that this game has it where you run through the story and then you run through it again. You gradually unlock characters, because guess what it did? I know nowadays we're in the day and age, hey, you can play the way you want, gamer. How about no? How about learn the game and then hop online? You know, that's what I'm just saying is I think unlocking the characters was such a key part of giving fighting games longevity, fun single player unlocks. And actually, as I was searching up how to unlock certain characters in the game, one thing I learned was, and I don't know if anyone remembers this rumor, I remember hearing it in like first grade, so I'll talk about it in a sec for Smash Bros. But there was a rumor that if you beat everything in the game on the hardest difficulty without dying, that you'd get SSJ4 Goku in Budokai 1. And so there are game facts boards I was finding online of people going, does anyone know how to unlock this? Like, oh yeah, you got to do this. And it reminded me of in Smash Bros, when I was in first grade, I was being told by a couple of buddies that in order to unlock Mewtwo, you had to beat the game on hard without dying once throughout. I remember almost getting there as a kid, but I never did. But all I heard was, yeah, it's a thing. Yeah, it's a thing. And to my knowledge, when I looked it up way later in my life, it was never a thing. But it reminded me of the time where games and sharing information was so primitive. You got to remember, like, nowadays being a gamer is like a common thing. Like, yeah, you can tell anyone you're a gamer. You're not going to be judged for it. Back then, it was a toy. It was this geeky thing to do. You were kind of a loser for gaming. But now it's so celebrated. But back then, these game facts boards, maybe a strategy guide or two, was the only information you had to learn these sorts of things. So I don't want to go too off the rails here from the point of the video, but this was also a hub to like shared rumors and myths about the game, which just brought back my own memories of how that happened with Smash Bros. And I thought it was the only game it happened with, and maybe just my school, but it seems like when it came to other games, these myths had formed about the title. So I just thought this was a really cool discovery, because there are hidden ones. Like when you unlock Frieza's spaceship, you can die and then Frieza's spaceship will appear. You'll come back to life as Cyber Frieza. And the way you do this is by playing through the Namekian Saga on the hardest difficulty and defeating Frieza all of those times without losing once. So there are little hidden unlockables such as that. You can also unlock Hercule by winning a world match at the adept level to unlock him. I know it's not like a crazy unlock. If you beat Raccoon with Vegeta, you'll unlock Dodoria. I mean, there are just some instances where specific characters are unlocked specific ways, which I always loved. Like, I think, speaking of Smash Bros, that's where all that love comes from. Is Smash Bros was a series that I loved because it was always wondering, like, when you finish that whole arcade story mode, who was the character waiting for you at the end? And there were certain ways you had to play the game to unlock those characters. And to me, character unlocks are everything in fighting games. Now, there are other ways of progressions. I mentioned the world tournament. You can participate in the tournaments in this game, a classic in Dragon Ball games. Naturally, I had to pull out my boy Android 17 and do some work here. But after you complete these, you get Zenny, and then you can go buy capsules at the skill shop and attach these capsules to various characters to give them different abilities, from Sensu Beans to Super Saiyan and so on and so forth. So you can upgrade them and customize them and then use these in more world tournaments to unlock more things and to naturally carry them into the story mode and unlock any secrets that you may have been missing. So that was what was cool about fighting games back then. You just kept digging a little bit and a little bit. And so it wasn't, again, what I say, like a broken record, every fighting game had to be on Evo. It was a fun, competitive fighting game, very easy on the combos, but very unlock focused, very cinematic focused, secrets focused. And just like what I talked about with the TMNT 2003 games, those are what makes these games special. The cheat codes, the secret unlocks, the weird ways to play the game, the self-imposed challenges to get Frieza's spaceship, and so on and so forth. That is what made these games special. And plus those fun little cutscenes like, you know, Cell absorbing Krillin and going, oh man, I'm weak now. I mean, just playing with the power levels of the characters in this world. It's awesome. Dragon Ball Z Budokai, still a good time. Yeah, you could pick up the PS3 HD remaster. I would still recommend it, quite frankly. I know that you're not going to get the original soundtrack, but I'm not going to act like the soundtrack in the HD remaster is so horrifically bad that you just can't play that version at all. It's just missing, for the purists out there, the original soundtrack. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm looking forward to seeing your thoughts on Dragon Ball Z Budokai. What do you make of this OG Dragon Ball game? I'm looking forward to seeing your thoughts. And with that, take excellent care of yourselves. And I will see you in the next Retro Rebound. Peace out.